Loretta.
You gotta bang your gavel. Don't you have a gavel?
No, there isn't one here.
Well, I used to have one. Well, tell her to bring it for you.
It's all paid for by corporate interests. I remember back in 1997, my father would always read the paper cover to cover. And in 97, pharmaceuticals won the right to put my father said, this is the worst thing ever because Americans are going to be addicted to drugs. Yes. This is the worst thing.
Okay, Loretta, are we live?
You can start, it's a problem. I have to text Jason. I'll be right with you. They're pushing their products. That's what they're doing.
Well, what I learned from my own dealings with media when I was in the DA's office, saw reports and I said, what? You know, what happened? That wasn't the answers. It always showed you that it's subject to someone's interpretation or what agenda someone has life or whether it's
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Holmdel Zoning Board of Adjustment, today being April 6th, 2022. Call to order. Jason, please.
In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, NJSA 10:4-10, and the regulations governing remote meetings, NJAC 5:39-1.5, I hereby announce that adequate notice and electronic notice of this meeting was provided in a notice dated January 5th, 2021 and January 19th, 2022 that was sent to the Asbury Park Press, Two Rivers Times, posted on the public board, the bulletin board, and on the main access door to Town Hall, filed in the clerk's office, and posted on the township website, holmdeltownship.com.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Avron?
here.
Dr. Blumenthal?
Here.
Mr. Burkle?
Here.
Ms. Campus? Here. Dr. Lateef? Mr. Luciani?
Here.
Mr. Urbanitopoulos?
Here.
Ms. Perez?
Here.
And Dr. Shaw.
Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and then stay standing for a moment of silence to honor police, military who've been wounded or killed in action. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. In the absence of Dr. Lateef, we'll seek Ms. Perez for all items on tonight's agenda. I'd like to introduce to the board and others who are here. Our engineer tonight is Bob Mullen. He's also from the Collier's firm as our regular engineer, Bob Bucko, who has been out sick. And the two Bobs have adjacent offices, so Bob Mullen is also the planning board engineer, so he's familiar with what we do, and he's filling in for Bob Bucko for tonight. So welcome, Bob. Going on, the first item on tonight's agenda is the completeness waivers.
Item number 1, completeness waivers, 2125 NJSH Route 35, Holmdel Storage Developers, LLC. Preliminary final major site plan, number 2022-01, Block 58, Lot 25, in the TMHO-3 zone. Applicant proposes to construct a 4-floor, 3-story and basement self-storage facility, along with associated parking, handicap parking, loading, and driveway areas. Variances are requested to reduce the front yard setback to allow the placement of the building and parking within the setbacks required. It is also required to eliminate the front and side yard landscape buffer requirements to allow the placement of the project as shown on the plans. A variance is also requested for FAR to allow the proposed project.
For the applicant,
Michael Maselli, Prime and Tubel.
Donald Hawes with Bogia Engineering.
So Loretta is, well, for this is just completeness review only. It's not for a public hearing, so we don't have notice yet or any of those questions. Is escrow in order?
Yes,
Thank you. You want to state what you're proposing, and we'll then get into the completeness review. And we do have a letter from our engineer who has reviewed and looked over the site plan.
Okay, the plans are pretty straightforward. I love doing self-storage facilities. They're going to be a light use for your township. They're the lowest traffic use commercial that I found so far that can go in. It's a 3-story built up and then 1 basement floor for a total of 4 floors, self-storage with a climate control. So it's all interior. It's not the typical old style garage door, what they call Gen 1 type units that you're used to seeing. It's more upscale, nicer. The variances, I think, were pretty straightforward, what we're going to be asking for. When we get to that hearing, we'll have a planner for the testimony necessary for that. Everything we're working for, waiting for the technical review letter from the engineer, and we plan to address everything for that.
Okay, Bob, would you like to summarize the completeness review letter that you folks have submitted?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our office issued a completeness review letter dated March 4th of 2022. It was prepared by Bob Bucko. And in general, we reviewed all the submitted documents. We went through the application checklist, and for the most part, found the application to be generally complete from an engineering standpoint. We did highlight 3 completeness waivers that were requested by the applicant, and I'll go through those 3 in detail. The applicant is requesting a waiver from Section 30-8 Attachment 1G2 not to provide cross sections and profiles of all existing and proposed streets abutting the lot and within 250 feet. As there are no streets proposed, and the project will not alter grades or conditions. Essentially, the development fronts Route 35. We would not object to granting that waiver. The third waiver is also from Section 38, Attachment K2, not to provide complete accommodating of all trees on the project site. Project has limited tree removal areas to the greatest extent possible and generally only impacts newer trees in front of the project. We would not necessarily object to that either. However, we would ask that as the hearing goes through, that information be provided should the board so desire. The last waiver request is from Section 38, Attachment 1, H7, not to provide locations and cross sections of water courses and drainage facilities within 300 feet of the development, including flood hazard area boundaries. That we would be a little concerned with. That's something we want to see, knowing that there are numerous flood complaints within the township. Any and all data associated with streams, especially Mahoris Brook in that part of town, and associated with the potential flood hazard area, we believe we should see. So we would not recommend that waiver being granted. That concludes my review, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. And I mean, as I looked over your letter, there were a number of other items where you had comments that perhaps the information wasn't necessarily complete, or in some cases conflicting, and that just leads to confusion, and is best to avoid that kind of situation. And whether or not the waivers are granted tonight, I would suggest that you take these comments to heart and update them, and as prior to we get to any hearing. I'll just for myself comment on a couple of those, that on, let's see, on page 7, under buildings and structures, the provision for root refuse, garbage, recyclables, and all of that kind of stuff, that's something the board generally takes a look at and likes to see on the plans. Question of existing underground storage tanks, wells, septic systems, and the like, that can be a problem.
Correct.
For everyone. And so identifying what is there and what needs to be done about it is important.
We have ordered a phase 1, I think, assessment for the site to determine any of that.
Yeah, I'll agree with our engineer about anything associated with the wetlands, the streams is important. And it's something the township has been very concerned about because of flooding, in particular in that watershed. There has been, FYI, an ongoing study by Rutgers about the water flow in the Mahoris-Waycake watershed. And I just heard last night and verified it earlier today that a preliminary report is being given by the person from Rutgers, Matt Lacconi. It will be given at the Township Committee meeting on Tuesday night. It's the same report as was previously given to the Environmental Commission. It has a number of interesting things about how in this particular watershed, the elevation above sea level ranges from 0 to 300 feet. And that water always goes downhill. And that impacts how things will get addressed. Another one that I always home in on is under and in the environmental, that apparently at present no easements are shown. However, the township does have requirements that wetlands buffers all be in easements, depending on the nature of the buffer as to whether it's a conservation easement or a landscape easement. And that it's important that that be shown on the plans as well. With that said,
I have a comment.
go ahead. Other board member questions or comments?
Tree and landscaping. Why are there waivers and why are some accepted as is for that? So whoever needs to speak, I guess, Bob, why not? Why is it that you commented that the way you did?
Regarding the removal of trees, the waiver is to provide, not to provide complete common names of all trees within the project site. Not to provide a survey. They're going to provide that. This is just to name them all.
Okay.
And certainly we can get that information as we go through the process.
So what's the reason why we don't want to see that? That's normally done.
I'm not saying we don't want to see it. We don't
Right.
need to see it for completeness at this point. However, based on the chairman's comments, the applicant's going to provide additional information, and I would certainly recommend they provide that information as they're doing so.
Okay, so the same, my question goes for item 2, 3, 4, and 9 on your review letter.
In which section?
In section O, tree and landscaping.
Okay. Well, I mean, one thing I noted that is unique to this particular site, there is some extensive wetlands, which by state rules, they cannot disturb.
Correct.
So that they're not proposing as detailed a survey of every tree in that area. And if they can't touch it and won't touch it,
That's different.
yeah. So that there's a distinction between where on the property things are as to what is needed to understand what's preservable or not.
So what about item 4 and 9?
This is, I guess, on pages 9 and 10. 10, 11. Yeah.
Well, we're stating here that this is it's acceptable from an engineering standpoint for completeness only. We're not saying it's not necessary to be presented to the board during the hearing process.
Okay, well, I expect to see all of those items here for the hearing. Just make sure that they understand that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
No, we understand that there will be revisions and that we will submit them in time for your engineer to review them, for the board members to review them, so we can have a clear picture of where everything is and what's being removed and what the survey is, what everything looks like out there. So we understand there's going to be more work. There's more work to be done. We understand that.
Including number 9, where you show the sizes, how it's going to look, because I'm going to be concerned about
Yeah.
how this building is going to be screened from 35,
We can
being
absolutely-
3 stories high.
Absolutely, we can do that.
Other questions? Valerie?
Why are we doing the completeness review now when we're not really going to have a hearing for several weeks on this application?
But they've submitted and they're entitled to apply for completeness.
Well, I mean, in light of that fact, you know, if we were gonna go right into a hearing, maybe I'd be more inclined to vote to wait to get something that's missing that we wanna see, like, you know, the rest of the environmental stuff, but I'm not sure why this far in advance I'd be inclined to vote that way if we're still missing substantial materials.
If there is a date that you would like to have all that information in, so that we, if we know we're not getting on the next meeting, if we know where it's gonna be on, just say the middle of, I don't know, I'm just picking a date, I'm not suggesting dates, June. If you tell us, you gotta get this to us by May 10th, we'll get it to you by May 10th. This way we can keep the process moving and give us targets to hit. Sort of like a conditionally complete thing, saying you're conditionally deemed complete, as long as you get us everything by this date, you'll be on an agenda.
And what's the difference if we deem you complete tonight or next meeting, or the meeting after that?
It would give us the ability to start tonight on, I mean, we could do that anyway, but it would give us milestones to hit and give us a target to at least move the process along and feel like we're headed
I think
towards.
there's also a legal distinction that if it's deemed complete, the clock starts for the board.
Yeah.
Correct,
Whereas if it's not deemed complete, then the clock stops.
right. There is a long time because there are variances, there is a long time to act. And I don't think that if the board had questions that we would be adverse to consenting to an extension of that
And
time.
just by practice for this board, we don't typically do completeness reviews and then hold off starting the hearings for weeks or potentially months. Typically, we do a completeness review and then,
Well,
being we deem it complete, we go right into the
I
hearing.
think that's also a function of how full the calendar is. And that we did have another hearing on for tonight, which will take most of the evening. And our secretary wanted to give them a shot at least talking to the board about this, even if we could not put them on for a full hearing tonight. So are you inclined then, Valerie, to say, to deem it incomplete at this point?
I am. I'd like to see everything.
Well, would you like to make a motion?
I will make a motion that we deem this application incomplete and give the applicant an additional time to gather the missing materials to resubmit to the board.
Is there a second to that motion?
I second it.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Avery?
Like the incomplete, complete always, so I'm voting yes for my motion, right? Yes.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
All right.
Dr. Bluthel?
Yes.
Mr. Burkle?
Yes.
Ms. Campus? Mr. Luciani?
Yes.
Mr. Urbanitopoulos?
Yes.
Ms. Perez?
Yes.
So it's deemed incomplete, so that stops the calendar, the clock. And it's up to you folks to do what you can, and then when it becomes clearer when you can do that, talk to Loretta to submit the information, and at that point, we'll see about following up and potentially setting up a hearing date. I mean, let me just, while you're here, indicate to the board members, our next meeting normally is in 2 weeks. That's not enough to give notice for anything regardless. However, tonight's the 6th, so 2 weeks is the 20th. That happens to be spring vacation week. And I'm aware of several board members who are not going to be available that night. Jill,
Won't be available.
Gaurav, Jason, and our engineer. So I think we need to cancel that meeting. Does anyone else know for sure they're not available that night?
I'm available. So.
Okay, some others of us
Do you have
are,
a
but
lot-
still,
anything?
once you get down to 6, there are other things coming up, so,
It's not because people can't come to the meeting, it's because we have lack of agenda.
no, it's both.
I have documents out to the professionals to review and give their determination.
Moreover, our next hearing may need to be continued, and it
So
would
it's
probably...
lack of agenda.
Well, we
It's-
could
it's
have
both.
probably let the storage facility start even as long as we had a quorum, because we wouldn't have to vote, and then the absent members could watch it back.
Yeah, but it
We
gets...
can't hear the dementia center, though, probably that would not be wise, so.
Correct, because they're not going to finish tonight, and they're going to need to continue them, but hence, without a full
Right.
quorum, it doesn't make sense. So
Right.
I suggest we cancel the meeting of the 20th.
We would have to notice anyway by Friday. I don't think that's possible.
Correct. So, is there a consensus to cancel the meeting of the 20th?
Yes.
Okay?
So is there a motion to cancel it?
I'll make a motion. Cancel.
Second?
Francine, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that impacts our calendar. So any further things won't happen till early in May, and then maybe the second meeting, you might be more likely to be talking toward the second meeting in May or early June then, just to give you a flavor for where we're at schedule-wise.
Really appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
You
The
can send
net-
it to Tyler. He's still-
Who was at the meeting? So
Oh, okay, yeah.
I don't remember you saying. Thank you.
Just write my name down. My card.
Yeah, well, let them, okay. Okay, go ahead, Jason.
Item number 2, continued public hearing, 470 Red Hill Road, Dementia Center, preliminary final site plan number 2020-6, block 49.02, lots 40, 40Q, and 41 in the R40B zone. Applicant seeks a use variance to create an assisted living residence, which will be a facility for those suffering from dementia for 105 residents. The facility will consist of a state-of-the-art residential memory support program that will house a variety of innovative programs and building design concepts, including an assessment program, educational services, and extensive community outreach and support.
This is a continued public hearing on this application. Let me reiterate for those who are not familiar with our process. Zoning board process is a quasi-judicial process as spelled out by state law and case law. We follow a standard procedure of the applicant in presenting their case, and they will continue to do so till they've completed their presentation of their case. They do this by various experts who've been involved in the preparation of the plan. They present their testimony. The board can question that. Board members can question that. At the conclusion of a block of time, we will open it to public questions on the testimony that was given by that witness, and only questions on that witness at that time. Tonight, I anticipate that focus will be on engineering aspects of the application. I had thought we were also going to have a planner, but I understand that the planner is not going to be here tonight, so we won't do that. After the applicant has completed their case, then objectors may have witnesses, and we go through the same process. A witness speaks, makes their testimony that can be cross-examined by the board and potentially the public, and only at the end of all of that is there a time period for public comment, and to make public comments, the person has to be sworn in under oath, and they are subject to cross-examination. With that, just to explain what our process is, I'll turn to Mr. Brown, the applicant's attorney, to continue presenting your case.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the public, and professionals. Thank you for having us back once again. I'll start by indicating, yes, we did plan to have James Higgins here. I talked to him this afternoon. He wasn't feeling very well this morning, and unfortunately, he has a temperature and some other complications, and I'm sure nobody would want him here. So he will be ready. I did anticipate you were going to cancel the next meeting, and I did confirm with him he is available, and God willing, he'll be very healthy and be happy to start and finish at that time. So I do have Hal Simboff here. Everybody up here is aware of Hal. We won't have him sworn in again unless you feel that would be needed, Mr.
No.
Flieger. And as a partial introduction, to give you a quick history, so for those of you who have been following this, there was a report in February by Bob and Bob's firm. There was a response that was submitted by Hal Simoff. Bob's office went through a detailed analysis. Yesterday, a very comprehensive report was submitted. I understand this afternoon there was a Zoom call between Bob and Hal about the issues. I hope there's some kind of general agreement on how to finish up on the matters, which Hal will talk about. Those of you who were early might have seen that we had our usual tech manager, Travis, here. Unfortunately, he went home sick. And but I do feel that since Hal has brought some physical materials here, sending him home was a very prudent, and it's not going to cause any problems. But with that as a prefatory statement, we're ready for Hal to go. Hal, could you start from where I left off, please?
Yes, I have
So Hal, just 1 second. We'll swear in Mr. Mullen, I think, because this is your first one for us, right? For
No,
this?
I was here
took the last
2 weeks
Was
ago.
that
Yes.
what you in?
Yes.
Okay, so you're, perfect, sorry about that.
I have a rendered site plan, which has which is based on the March.
Okay. If I could stop you there, Hal, because Loretta, I'd like to go through some housekeeping, if I could, Mr. Chairman. As I've done every hearing, at least for the last few months, 2022, I've referred back to the exhibits that were marked for identification last time. And so likewise, I'd like to indicate or request that A 21 through 25, which were all marked before, I think were all marked at the last hearing, be marked into evidence.
Okay. You have-
Okay. I just need to have that officially stated, so yeah. So thank you very much. Now, before we mark this paper exhibit, Loretta, I would like to have marked for identification the final, or at least the most recent revised set of site plans dated March 3rd, which were submitted by Mr. Simoff's office. And I can represent that as at least one of the bases for the comments in the report that Bob's office did.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
In that regard, let me mention, and also referring to a earlier this evening discussion briefly with Hal, Mr. Simoff, that as these processes go on, there are updated documents. It's always important to look at the most recent set of documents, and generally they include all prior aspects. So in the case of the site plan, Mr. Simoff confirmed that same thing is true. Many of these documents are posted on the township website under the zoning board, and also posted there, which some people may not have seen, is our most recent planner's review letter and engineering review letter, which spells out in lengthy detail what our professionals have provided in the way of comments to the board members. They're on the website, on the zoning board page, and the most recent ones, those two letters are with a link dated April 5th. If you go back to old site plans, some of them are still up there. That's a task for us to do, is to see what we can clean out to make it simpler for everyone. But generally speaking, you want to make sure you're looking at the most recent documents.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just looking at my letter, and I would add that while there is I forgot to update the date on mine, I did look at the 3-3 site plan for my report. I apologize for that typo. I did have them. I love when I make it a typo in the first paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know you did, yeah.
I mean,
apologies.
the papers accumulate, and it's sometimes nice to be able to clean out some items from the bottom of the pile,
Exactly.
especially if, in our case, our neighborhood tomorrow is recycling day.
Exactly. So Loretta, back to the beginning then, I'd asked to have marked the most recent revised site plan. It's dated March 3 at 8:26. Now, what Hal has up here is a one sheet. It is one of the sheets that are part of what is A26. There's one difference. Hal has responded to one of the requests, particularly by the chair, to add a red line which just delineates informally what would ultimately be the meets and bounds description for the landscape easement. That's the only difference, but since it is slightly different, I would suggest that this be marked as A27.
Okay, you don't want the traffic one, is it?
Oh, that'll be next.
So make that 8:20.
Yeah. And that's what's up on the board, and Hal will hand out to everybody
Oh,
the
excellent.
sheet that is up on the stand here. And so as he's handing this out, in lieu of looking at the screen, you know, you do have something that's a graphic that is part of the site plan. The only addition is the red line. Okay, Hal, you don't have to handle that individually. If you just hand it out to Dr. Shaw and he'll pass it down,
Yep.
we'll get moving right away. Yeah, thanks. Okay, thank you. All right, you all set, Hal? You want to do that now?
Oh, okay.
We'll get to that.
Let me just start with the response to the April 5th Collier letter that I discussed with Bob Mullen this afternoon.
Oops,
All right.
there's an extra.
We'll wait until they hand that out, and then we'll put a little more background documentation. So what Hal is going to refer to now is his response to the Bucco firm's letter back in February. It's part of the total record. I don't suggest we have to mark it separately, but that's what he's going to be referring to now. So the Collins letter is dated February 11. I don't suggest that has to be marked separately because that's automatically part of the record.
Correct.
But Hal wants to refer to that for context and for explanation of what he's going to talk about tonight. Is that fair to say, Hal?
Yes, well,
Okay.
the February 11th letter by Collier, on March 10th, I submitted to Loretta, under cover letter of March 10th, a response to every item. I don't think it behooves taking all the time to go through all the comments.
Yeah.
But basically, all the comments that are in this February 11th are addressed in one form or another with my response of March 10th. And then just to give the board what happened next is I submitted a plan dated March 3rd. It's just been marked. And Collier responded with an April 5th response. Many of the April 5th questions were answered in my March submission, and when we discussed it this afternoon, I think that everything is on the plan in one way or another. There are some environmental questions about, as an example, there are some environmental questions about the steep slopes, and they're on one of my sheets.
A prior sheet.
Well, the March 3rd. So I think under this April 5th, and Bob Mullen can chime in when I'm saying something out of turn, but virtually everything except the section on drainage. Everything except the section on drainage that starts on page...
You have to hold the mic close for it to pick up.
on page 6, stormwater management review, most of those, virtually everything else in that April 5th is been submitted in one form or another. As I stated, the review says the environmental impact statement doesn't have steep slopes, but the steep slopes are on my plan. So it's a bookkeeping item to clear up all those outstanding issues.
And so to get to the heart of this, you'll be back again, because we want to make sure
I'm
that
gonna
we answer all the
return.
questions. So between now and well before the next date, which is going to be May 3rd, I would assume that the number of pages is going to be reduced further, and the hope is that your testimony will be next to nothing. Is that fair to say?
Yes, because I'm going to address all the, on page 6, G, stormwater management review. We went over most of those items this afternoon, and I'm going to answer all those questions.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
And I apologize because I came into this application 75%
Go
of
ahead.
the way through. So we issued a review letter back on November 1st of 2021, which was quite intense. We issued another review letter dated February 11th, which Mr. Sonmoff had referred to. His March 10th submittal responded to. But that February 11th letter was very limited in scope, lighting and landscaping, and some general comments. I'm not sure, and again, I'm coming in late to this game, if this board has ever seen a response to the November 21st of 21 letter. Now, I can tell you that most of these comments have in fact been incorporated in the latest set of plans, but has the board seen, or has Mr. Simoff presented testimony in response to this particular letter? Or are we talking about all of that now?
Well, let me just, I want to answer all the comments, and the problem is that when different comments come up every month, it makes it more difficult to answer. You know, if I got a February 11th letter, I answered it, and then April 5th, more different items come up. I don't have a problem responding, but I just have to know what to respond to.
Right. Unfortunately, it's a big, complex application. We're peeling the layers of the onion, and then sometimes you turn over a rock and you find something else that you didn't expect. So that's not unusual. In general, I believe our engineers try to cross off and not include items that have been resolved.
That's what I thought.
And I can stipulate to the fact that what was issued in our April 5th letter are all outstanding comments.
Okay, then I will respond to the April 5th letter incomplete.
Good. And I'd like to just go through a couple of items from the April 5th letter that struck me to make sure that you have all the inputs that you need so you can provide a comprehensive response, and hopefully we can get closure on this whole thing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, one item, and I'm not sure, this is, for example, related to the lot coverage variance. There have been revisions which have revised the numbers, but I take it Mr. Higgins is the one that presumably would testify about the justification for that variance,
Yes,
rather than Mr. Simhoff.
that's correct.
Fine.
And
So
he'll be
that is
relying
yet
on-
to come.
He'll be relying on Kate Keller's report of April 1st. Kate has raised that, and Jim is fully ready, willing, and able. Well,
Right.
not tonight, but he was ready and able up until this afternoon. He'll be here.
Then, with regard to category G, starting on page 6 of that letter, with regard to stormwater management, as indicated, this is in the Mahoris-Waycake watershed. It is clearly something of concern to the residents of the town. This indicated there were some, I'll call it technical, whether it's more technical or less technical, I'm not qualified to say. There were some issues that the engineer found. in which certain things did not necessarily appear to meet the state rules. We have no authority over that. It's the DEP that actually, in the end, has the authority, although the DEP has required the township to adopt the same rules. But there were some issues with regard to whether certain infrastructure is appropriately green and hence meets the state rules which now require green infrastructure. I think it's important that we feel confident that all of the state rules are in fact being met. And, Mr. Mullen did indicate earlier to me that he's had a lengthy conversation with you and he sees closure coming, but
Yes,
I would like to see it on paper.
of course. And that's why I don't think it behooves us to go through all those items tonight, because a revision is coming to address them.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, if I could just give one example, and I much appreciate Bob being here. I know it's a challenge. I know you were here last night for the planning board, and this is Bob Bucko's file, and it is complicated. We've had numerous additions, but I'll just give one example to show you why. You can ask Hal all the questions you want, he'll go through it, but I think we'll go too far down a rabbit hole without necessarily doing that. So, for example, you were at page 6. I'll just go to page 8, for example, the EIS. Well, if you looked at the February document, which from our point of view narrowed issues down, it asked one question with a numerous number of subheadings. The Trident report, that's the EIS company, specifically responded to that on March 10th. And if you look, nobody should look at it, it's a little technical, but it goes to every item through item 10, many of which have already been responded to, if not all of them. But if you look at the report that was generated yesterday, this has 13 points, and maybe only 2 of them relate to the question that was raised before. And I'm just mentioning that as part of the process. So I don't expect Bob to, I know a lot of this is subcontracted out to other experts. We're going to resolve it, but I think part of the resolution is going to be that we've already addressed them all. We've addressed a lot of them.
I'm sorry, I have to correct what you said. We don't subcontract anything out.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
It's all done internally.
Oh,
There are other experts in-house
That's what I
who do the review, but we don't sub it out.
Okay. I know he's been talking to other folks, but they're all in-house. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, clearly, as an example, on page 8, there's, under the environmental impact statement, it says identify steep slopes. I have the steep slopes on my existing condition now.
Right.
So it's there, it's just not in the right place.
Okay. As long as, since you mentioned steep slopes, the township does have ordinances requiring about what you can or can't do with regard to steep slopes, and it also has some easement requirements with regard to what they call very steep slopes. Is that, I'm not sure where they all are, and if looking at this sheet showing the landscape easement, are all of the steep slopes within an appropriate easement?
No, there are some steep slopes just south of this red line. The steep slopes are predominantly in this area.
Yeah, you see them when you drive by.
Right here.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little pocket of steep slopes back on the western side of the property. They're on sheet.
Are they appropriately encumbered with easements the way they need to be per our ordinance?
They are not at this time, no.
So that needs to be addressed yet.
Again, we've never been asked for that. We're more than happy to do that, just like we offered voluntarily the landscaping easement on north.
Yeah.
Not a problem at all. It really speaks for itself.
Can I interrupt a second? I'm just wondering, why do we need to go through all of this? Why isn't this between the 2 engineers? And this is trivial for us to waste an evening listening to this.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so can we come to a conclusion and let the 2 engineers work this out? He has his review letter, follow it, and answer it, and that's it.
And why didn't this happen before tonight?
Because we didn't receive the letter until yesterday.
Well, But that's
yesterday
probably
afternoon.
the plans got submitted very late, right?
No,
No, the plans
now
were
the plans were
submitted
submitted
March 10th.
March 10th.
We're wasting our time.
So we are dealing with some personnel issues. Mr. Bucko's been out sick for 5 weeks. And I apologize for the delay in the last minute letter.
No, none necessary, but we all know Bob's been sick, and that's not anybody's
And
fault.
it's not
I
an
don't
ex-
mean
that
as
is not an
a criticism
excuse.
of Bob. What I mean, though, is that we have a room full of people here, and we have a board, and we're constantly rehashing testimony here multiple times. It's completely unnecessary and not really appreciative of the fact that people have other important things to do. So,
If I may answer that. And just what Bob Mullen just said, the April 5th letter is everything that they're concerned about. True?
That is correct.
It's a composite, and I will answer all the items.
Okay,
Okay,
well,
so end the subject.
whether you're satisfied.
Move on to the next item.
Well,
Okay.
I'd like to move on one more, because this is something that I know residents have been concerned about, and we have not discussed here at all yet, namely the sanitary sewer and the pump station. There is a bunch of questions that have been raised here. Just driving by, I see fire hydrants on that side of the street, which implies there are water lines on that side of Van Scoik. There's other utilities there. The last set of drawings were inconsistent as to the size of the pipe that was being proposed. I'm not at all clear that this has been completely adequately addressed. I do look for our professionals to do it, but I want to make sure, from the sake of Holmdel, that we're all comfortable that what's being proposed is going to work and be
Well,
appropriate.
if I can give a short answer to that, hopefully it's complete but short. The sanitary sewer review is done by the municipality. And as a condition from this board, we would request that that the sanitary sewer design, because the municipality has to sign the application. And obviously, I haven't done the final design.
Is
of
the
this.
municipality, or in our case, the county?
It has-
Because the Holmdel no longer has a Board of Health.
No, it's called a treatment works approval. The treatment works approval has to be is an application to the New Jersey DEP. It has to go from the municipality to Bay Shore, and Bay Shore confirms that they have the capacity, and then it goes to the DEP.
Who in the township would do that?
It is,
The engineering firm, or, because we don't have a Board of Health?
No, it's an administrative issue. It's really just signing an application to the DEP.
And, okay, but aside from that, is there some verification process that what's proposed is going to work?
We are asking for design calculations for both the substation and for the sanitary force main.
And we haven't seen that
We
yet.
have not gotten those yet.
Well, because it's not under the purview of this board, it's under the purview of the township.
yes. Yeah, I have spoken to the now retired administrator on the specific subject. It was verified that it is the township, and it is an administrative process. And once the application is received, then the administrator manager will have one of, at least back when I just had this information provided, it was one of 3 firms that could be involved. They will review it. They will review all the relevant topics that you're referring
We
to.
don't have any jurisdiction then? Okay.
For informational purposes, this board may want to know some basics. but
Yeah, I mean,
design
that's,
calculations-
I've certainly heard residents express concern about that. And hence, I feel it would be appropriate for there to be some information on the table explaining what's being planned, and that at least an engineer has indicated they feel it's reasonable.
I'd like to understand about the proposed sewer system.
Okay, I can give you a concept. There is a proposed pump station located opposite Dwight Road on the site. It's below ground. There's the only thing above ground is an electric board, with a control panel. There's a backup generator that's required, and that is on site. We're using the backup generator from the site, the total site, and that's going to power the sewer pump station in case of a backup, of a power failure. Then there's a force main that goes north on Van Soik and connects to the existing sanitary sewer that the township has on about 3,000 feet north.
And that'll tie into Holmdel sewer line, not Middletown sewer line?
Yes, Holmdel. So basically, we have the survey information for Van Soik. We have to talk to the county about where they want it in their right-of-way. And we're just to go, basically to go north. The pump station, again, is below ground, except for a electric panel. And there's, on one of the detail sheets, is a concept of the pump station. And we'll enclose it with a fence and shrubbery so that the electric panel is not visible.
So if I could assist the board in regards to the first document, which is, I hope everybody has a copy of the reduced, was handed out. If anybody didn't bring it, we have extra copies for everybody. But calling your attention to that document, if you look at the last page, mine is in small writing.
Is that A1? Is that
it's C.
document? A1 you're
I think it's the
No,
site plan.
it's the one tonight. It's
Oh, the one tonight.
A27.
26.
A20.
No, that's the
A26.
architectural.
Okay, this one.
And if you look at the last sheet, which is,
What's the description on the page?
it says conceptual off-site sanitary sewer plan. Oh,
Oh, it's in color, okay.
all right. And so that will highlight in part what Hal was just describing. Again, that's C22. And Hal, I don't know if you want to see some of the details that he just referred to, but you know, they're also on different pages here in terms of what the on-site provisions are. You want to allude to that quickly, Hal?
Yes.
Does Bay Shore Sewer Authority have to approve this?
Yes.
So they have done that yet?
No, they
No,
have
no.
the capacity. They won't entertain the application.
Yeah,
for the town.
for example, Mr. Vice Chair, if you look at the newest letter, in the last section, it refers to the standard permits and other collateral approvals that we have to get. I think it's the third approval is from the Bay Shore Sewer Authority. There's, under the sanitary sewer section, there's a question as to which entity has jurisdiction. But, so the application goes to the township, and as a condition subsequent, we will proceed with the time and expense to go through those channels. It's the township. It'll be signed off also by Bay Shore. And then it goes to DEP under a multiple week review process.
Now, does our town engineer have to review this also? Because you're putting in a new pipe going up that street and you're passing developments that you never know in the future, maybe they may want to connect. I know they're all on septic now. Will that pipe and the pump station handle that capacity if that happens in the future?
I addressed that a couple of hearings before, at least in part, and the answer is that there's nothing that is being proposed that would prohibit, for example, the adjacent homeowners association houses from hooking up. It's an independent process. The members of that HOA are more than welcome to talk about that kind of hookup. We're not allowed to do that.
I'm not saying they should look into hooking up today or tomorrow. I'm just asking about the capacity. Is somebody, either our town engineer or somebody, doing some math and saying, hey, this will allow for X amount additional residents to go onto this pipe? Or are we going to put a pipe and then find out that 2 more people can only hook up to it?
Well, from a particular point of view, our application would be just for the purpose of showing that the capacity needed would be provided. So that's all we would have to look at. Now, whether or not the township wants to look beyond that, that's certainly up to the township. I'm sure the capacity figures are easily attainable from Bayshore, but that's not necessarily something that would be part of our plan.
So you're just designing it to meet your needs, basically?
Yes, that's correct, and that's correct.
Bob, does somebody else need to get involved with this on our town level and make a determination? Because if we're running pipes through the road and digging them up, it doesn't make any sense that it only handles one facility.
It's beyond just the township because it's a county road as well.
Right.
So the county, Monmouth County also has jurisdiction on it. From a strict sanitary perspective, they're proposing a force main. So to tie into that with other homes in the neighborhood is not as simple as a gravity feed. And it is something that would require a larger scale analysis, if you will. So as referenced before, the town has 3 engineers that could be reached out to do that analysis and provide input.
I think put that on the list of things that need to be looked at.
Yeah, I mean, I had questions about the capacity as well, because on that prior submittal, on some pages it said it was a 2-inch line, on other pages a 3-inch line. And where I live, I happen to be on septic, but the adjacent area, Mount Drive, is on sewer, where there's a pump station which has recently been failing. It's in there proposing to reroute and put in a new line, and that's costing close to $1 million.
Yeah.
And that's a 4-inch line serving perhaps 75 houses.
Yes.
50 houses. So
Well,
I was saying, when you see 2-inch, that's not a very big line.
Well,
I can say, as having been some time ago a sewage authority attorney with that background, the law is very clear that for any particular application, the particular applicant needs to show that it can provide sanitary sewer for its project. Now, it's also certainly possible, if it's desired, to ask an applicant to upsize, for example. I don't know if that...
I don't think we're doing that. We just want to make sure what's proposed will work.
Yeah, but
That's
I also
correct.
want to make sure, to me, I don't want somebody down the road say, hey, you guys approved that, and you approved a 2-inch pipe.
We don't approve the sewage.
No, I understand, but we need to address it. Somebody in our township needs to find out and ask the questions.
It's a good question. We have a month at least to the next meeting.
Yeah, so somebody, whoever that is, Bob, whether you got to reach out to somebody or the applicant reaches out to somebody, but somebody should say, hey, don't worry about, for example, Country Woods. They're never going to hook up to that. So we don't care. We're just going to put a 2-inch pipe, and if they ever do, we'll worry about it then.
Well,
You could say that, or you could say, hey, let's put a bigger pipe in case Country Woods someday wants to hook up. There's already, the pipes are already there. And it could save the town a lot of money and everybody else a lot of money.
Yeah, what we had already offered, I believe I had stated, is that if for some reason the township wants to consider in the future another tie-in, while we are excavating the trench to put in our pipe, if the township wants to put in, for example, a lateral pipe, that's certainly something that we would work with the township on.
I'm not sure quite what the right protocol or sequence is. Bob, you're probably the post from our side most knowledgeable. Potentially you could reach out to Ben, the township engineer, and at least raise the question, that the question has come up here as to who and how that could be addressed.
I will, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
And they have to dig up the roadway between
Well,
that corner and the next intersection?
Well, on that side of the street, which I drive by all the time,
Yeah.
I look at it driving by and I say, ooh, there are power lines, there's telephone lines, there's fire hydrants, and, yeah, I think there's a gas line there, all on the side of the street.
Yes,
well, we're going to try and put it behind the curb, in the right of
You
way.
won't have to dig up the asphalt?
But then that means you got to dig up the street.
No, they're going to run on the sidewalk.
On the
where the sidewalk
There's
is.
no sidewalk there.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what they would dig up.
Well, I would say again, the jurisdiction of this board relates only to on-site, which Hal has talked
There's
about.
drainage ditches.
As a condition, we will make the application. Certainly Bob here can
but somebody needs to
He'll
verify.
either be the
that
one
it's
who
gonna work.
reviews it, or he can talk to whoever the township assigns to, and certainly bring this up. Actually, I brought it up in terms of,
Yeah.
what the township might be thinking. But again, you don't have to worry because it's not your decision, but we will make sure, Bob and the applicant will make sure that it's considered by the township.
I think that's the key.
And we should have something in writing if the town declines or whatever they say, we need to see that in writing. A form from the letter, from the town engineer or somebody.
Oh, sure.
I just want to make sure that our bases are covered.
Well, it's going to be a condition of
Agreed.
approval.
Right.
What's that?
It's going to be a condition of the approval because
Correct.
we're proposing sewer and it's reviewed by a different agency and that's what we'll submit.
And like in all approvals of major applications, there's a whole list of approvals, and if they're not obtained, then the project is null and void, or it has to be brought back, whatever. But I'm sure the township officials will very closely monitor all those checklist items. And certainly there won't be any building permit issued unless and until all those prerequisites, which might be in a resolution, are met. Is that fair to say, Mr. Flieger? based on
Correct, yes,
experience?
yes. That's traditional what we do.
Yes.
Okay. Well, all right, I think, Francine?
Can't hear. She needs a
We're
mic.
talking a lot about, I don't want to use the mic. I'm trying to speak very loudly. We're talking about the capacity, what will work, what won't work. My concern is that if we make a design, it turns out it's not good. Whose responsibility is it? Does the town have some exposure here?
No.
Things are not working, who's going to fix it?
Oh, well, in terms of the design, the applicant's experts have to prove to the township, and Bob, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, prove to the township, and then also in relation to Bay Shore, and also to DEP, that the design is such that it can handle it.
Okay, this review is going to be reviewed by the township, by Bay Shore, by Monmouth County, and the DEP.
But afterwards,
as a condition of this approval.
fine, but afterwards, once it's built,
Oh,
in spite of the fact that everybody's approved it, suppose it doesn't work, who's responsible? Who owns it?
Well, I asked Mr. Flieger if he...
Is it based? No.
It's
I mean, the one in our neighborhood, the force line is owned by the township.
No, this one's probably going to be
Yeah.
owned by,
And I think Bell Works owned its,
Correct.
they may have owned it, so if you have your own force main, it may be that your client will own that, but.
right, we'll
that's
have
an
to
issue with the
own
town
it and
attorney
maintain it.
Yes.
Myself, we'll get to that if we get there.
That's correct. But certainly as a matter of self-interest and a matter of credibility, and again, we've been testifying for quite some time that this organization has been operating for 100 years. It has multiple facilities, and it takes pride in assisting people. So certainly, we would never want to construct anything if something is, or for anything, but in light of the obvious needs here, that won't work. And certainly, in the very least, there would be responsibility for the owner. I looked at Mr. Flieger because there are differences depending on who owns it, but we will take pride, and I'm sure it's going to be very carefully reviewed by all steps of these governmental entities.
I might not have any hair left when this is, after this.
Okay, I mean, we spent a few minutes on this, more than they potentially had expected, but I think it's important that we consider what impacts may be on the residents, future residents. Are there any other questions now on the testimony Mr. Simhoff has done tonight, or do you still have some further things to go?
So I just wanted to add that this revision, I call it a site rendering plan. I added the, what I call a landscape easement line. So it would be basically between the red line and the property line. But again, based on the comments tonight, we'll add the steep slope to the, and there's a small steep slope on the
Right.
western side. And they're on the, I'll point them out. They're on sheet 2.
Yeah.
Of the site plan set. And then, at the last time I testified, there was a discussion of the number of parking spaces. And originally I showed 80 paved spaces based on the information that was provided for the employee count. And at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there's a shift change. And at that point, there would be about, for the half hour or so, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there would be about 60 employees on site. And so we showed 80. The discussions at the last hearing requested some additional parking spaces for visitation days when there's high visitation. And so what I did is I added grasscrete for 10 spaces, and then further up I added lawn parking for another 10 spaces. So we originally had 90 paved spaces. So now I have 90 spaces that are either paved or grasscrete, and then another 10 that we can go on we can put on the lawn. And we'll grade the lawn accordingly. The township ordinance has 0.5 in one zone. In 2 zones, the township ordinance calls for 1.5 for an assisted living, and in a 3rd zone, it calls for 1.75. We have 1.75 spaces paved. And I also did some more research, and the residential site improvement standards also calls for 0.5 spaces per bed. And so that would be about 52 parking spaces. So
a lot of that's spelled out in the additional traffic letter that you
Yes.
sent.
and that's what
And with that in mind,
talk to.
you all have it, but he's alluding to it, so I would ask Loretta to mark, which I think is going to be the last document, and I believe we're up to, is it A28? And it is the memo that the chairman is referring to. It is dated March 24th. It has been submitted in the normal course, and I believe it was alluded to in your professionals' reports. Is that okay?
Yeah, right. In the medical zone and the RT 35H zone, the ordinance requires 0.5 per bed, which is consistent with the residential site improvement standards.
Yes, but you already said that you actually need 69 parking spaces at 2 o'clock, right? So 0.5 per bed doesn't seem to jive with what you really need.
Well, that's why we're providing more.
Right. Okay. So I don't know why.
Well, I'm just saying that we meet
referencing
the
these.
ordinance. The
Yeah, but
ordinance, and we meet the RSIS, but I just wanted to put those numbers in perspective.
Okay, but they
But
don't
our
really,
particular-
they're not pertinent to your particular.
Our particular use has a maximum shift change for about a half hour, 2 o'clock on a weekday, of about 65 spaces. So that, but beyond that half hour period, for the shift change at 2 o'clock, the number, we have about 40 or 45 empty spaces. And then on weekends, there's limited office personnel.
I understand.
And that number goes up to about 50 spaces. Off the shift change.
Off the shift change, you're up around 59, I understand.
Yeah.
You dropped 9, so you're 59.
I'm giving you approximate numbers.
Yeah, well, I'm giving you the exact number that you have.
But what I'm saying is, there's no office personnel on weekends. So
Right.
it's about 10 spaces more available on weekends for
Correct,
visitors.
yeah,
And there's no, but the shift change is still the same.
right.
The staffing, the nursing, and the cleaning people, they're 7 days. So, so other than the 2 o'clock shift change, we have 40 or 50 parking spaces available for visitors.
Now, also, for past reference, at the March 16th hearing, there was testimony by Cindy Jakes about A25, which is this amended shift change that Hal's alluding to, and that document is actually part of the A28 that we just marked. It's the last sheet. So you've heard different points of testimony during different hearings, and now we're summing it up.
But basically, I wanted to put the parking issue in perspective.
Yeah, okay. Do you have any further testimony at this point for tonight?
One more issue.
Okay.
Accident studies.
Yes.
I think there's been discussions, it hasn't been asked, but I went and did it. I went and I looked at the database for the New Jersey DOT that collects all reportable accidents. The last available year was 2019. The standard is to take 3 years of accident history. I did that. I plotted them.
This is on page 3 of that document.
Right, and I plotted them, and there are 5. It turns out that there are 5 accidents per year on the 1,100 feet of frontage that we have. I found a New Jersey DOT counting station right at Dwight Road, and the average daily traffic volumes are 30,500 per day, which calculates out to 11.15 million vehicles per year. Accidents are categorized or calculated based on rate. So it turns out to be 0.45 crashes per year per million vehicles, which is not a high level. The peak hour, as I said, there's an excess of 30,000 cars a day passing this site.
Okay. Do any board members have any other questions about the engineering testimony given by Mr. Sidhoff?
Mr. Chairman, if I could just,
Yep.
I won't have him give any more, but just for the record, if you look at the conclusion section in pages 4 and 5, if you were going to articulate that, would it be the same? Do you have the same conclusions that you do set forth in your report?
Yes.
Also, you looked at the transcript of the testimony by Mr. Potter.
Yes.
He talked about his experience with traffic in and out of the site when he was operating, and to the present date dealing with the Alaka landscaping. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you integrate those figures into your study?
Yes. The garden center and the retail that was there before, based on Mr. Potter's testimony and based on reference material from the Institute of Transportation Engineer, they generate about 4 to 5 times as much traffic during the PM peak hour than what we would expect from this. And again, if you look at the memo, I have the DOT counts. They were taken at Dwight, the DOT counts, and they show the hourly variation. At peak hour, when it's about 3,000 cars an hour, it's obviously not when the shift change comes, and which at 2 o'clock, and based on the 2 o'clock hour, it's about, I think it's about 1,500 cars less out in front of the site. So from a traffic point of view, this is a better use of the site because it doesn't really compound the peak hour.
Mr. Chairman, I know you're going to ask questions, but I did go over to Bob and see if he wanted Hal to make any representations or the like. I want to make sure Bob's completely comfortable. So, Bob, if I understood correctly, you would like Hal just to reaffirm that we stipulate that we will address all the points that are set forth in the report from yesterday.
Yeah, as was mentioned earlier, Mr. Simoff and our team at Colliers, we spent quite some time on the phone going through this April 5th letter. Again, I apologize for the delay in getting out. And I would just ask that he stipulate he will comply with all comments as discussed earlier today that were outstanding in this letter.
If I don't, I won't get your approval.
That is correct.
Okay,
Is that
good,
good enough?
thank you. Kate, do you have any questions?
I have one clarifying question for Mr. Simoff, just about the parking that was just discussed.
Yes.
You mentioned grading the grass. I just want to confirm that the banked parking spaces, you're not proposing to park on grass. Those are parking spaces that could potentially be utilized in the future and paved or put in grasscrete if it was determined to be necessary.
We don't think, I think that 90 spaces is more than enough.
Yeah, I understand that, but the ones that are being proposed, those would not be suitable for parking as is.
Well, 10 are grasscrete.
Yes, I understand, yes.
You mean the other 10?
Yeah, I mean, it's the other 10, yes. So it's 80, 10 grasscrete, and then 10 that are shown on the plan in what's currently a grassed area. So I just wanted to clarify that is, they're shown as banked parking spaces that would be either turned into grasscrete or another parking surface in the future.
Well, I'll answer that.
If necessary.
Yeah, I would say that whatever you would like, we'll propose what you just said, and if that's what you're most comfortable with, that's what we'll do.
Okay, yes, just because just for a second, I didn't think that you were proposing that people to park on the grass back there.
I think that's exactly what they're proposing.
Yeah, well, I think it's really a question of what actual usage shows up.
I mean,
If once a year, 2 cars are on the grass, so be it. If it turns out it's every other week, then it should get some kind of pavement.
Okay, so yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify.
But there's
'cause
no
I
way
just-
to enforce that route. We're going to be long done.
Who's going to
so
enforce that as
nobody.
well?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't speak for them, but if there are that many people coming there at different points, that might come to the attention of traffic safety or
So
something.
my view
Yes.
is that they're
need the
doing
mic.
this as a side grass just to make our objections, to appease our objections on the parking overflow. So they've got the grasscrete spots and then they've got grass, figuring they'll just park people on the grass if that overflow is insufficient.
That's what I misunderstood. Yes.
Well-
I don't know offhand. There might be township requirements about parking on grass. Again, that's not generally we encourage from this perspective.
If I can just make a comment to that.
Yeah.
We're showing 90 spaces, 80 and 10 on grasscrete. We're confident that is adequate. But what I've seen in past is that the applicants submit a periodic count. Maybe you have somebody count on Mother's Day or Saturday peak visitation, and put into your resolution that just a simple letter from the applicant give you a count on certain days, and then if it comes up that they need the additional grasscrete, we'll put it in.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that enforcement technique in anywhere in this town
I've
before,
seen that.
so that
Well,
would be news to me.
First of all, and respectfully, we're not here to appease anybody on the board here. We're here to make sure you're comfortable. Hal has indicated that we fully comply with your ordinance, which we could just say is as far as we need to go, but we're not saying that. We want you to be comfortable. We want you to provide us with the direction that you're comfortable with. You do have a precedent for offering grass parking. You did that in 2020 with the...
It's not relevant, Mr. Brown. What we did in past
Well,
applications
I
has
thought you
no
said that you're not...
relevance to this
Okay.
application.
None.
You do have experience in offering grass parking on an overflow basis. We're happy to do whatever you want. We have a lot of space, but we don't need to have any more of the grasscrete or solid
pervious,
parking.
impervious.
But we're here to,
I think the suggestion of a pure occasional, once or twice a year verification of what's needed in the report to the township.
sure,
Put that as a condition in, and then,
very happy to
so
do
that
that.
there is some way of following up.
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I generally, when I hear the term bank spaces, there is often a kind of a mechanism, and it is imperfect, as you mentioned, Valerie, that it can be difficult to enforce.
I am quite confident that Mr. Blumenthal would follow up on it if he were able to. Beyond that, I have no confidence that anyone will follow up with it.
Well, I mean,
I will say that I have
people
seen the type of
change,
reports
situations
that
change.
justice officers
Guaranteeing something for forever is beyond what we can do.
Well,
We do our best.
Your planner has seen it before, I've seen it before, and we'll just talk about presenting a form that would have to be reported to the township.
Fine. I think that would be doable.
Yeah, the final condition is obviously up to the board, but I would be comfortable with that from this perspective.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions that board members have of tonight's testimony? Kate or Bob, do you have anything further?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have something. Mr. Simoff, what are your qualifications as a traffic engineer?
I'm a licensed professional engineer. I'm a fellow with the Institute of Transportation Engineers. I've been an adjunct professor of traffic engineering at NJIT, and I've been qualified in probably 200 municipalities as a professional traffic engineer.
Mr. Simoff, how long have you concentrated in traffic engineering in your career?
I was asked that question a couple. I've been licensed. There is no licensure for traffic engineers by the state. I'm licensed as a professional engineer.
Okay.
But my concentration over the years has been traffic engineering.
Have you testified before this board as a traffic engineer before?
I think so. Years ago, I testified on some billboards.
How long have you
The digital billboards.
Right.
So you're reluctant to indicate how long you've been
I was licensed, I think Bob Mullen and I talked about this the other day. I was licensed in 1982 or 1983.
and have you been involved as an expert in traffic engineering since that point?
Yes, I represent a couple towns in doing their review. I've worked for towns in Atlantic County. I planned the design of the Tropicana Resorts International, Golden Nugget in Atlantic City, and I have extensive. I don't gamble.
Thank you.
I just have a question, because as I'm reading this, it says 0.5, per bed, but then it also goes on to say 0.75 per bed. And I'm just curious to know the staff ratio per patient, because it is a different type of facility. So it's hard to compare this type of facility to an existing, dementia center, right? This is a one of a kind. So does this type of facility require more staffing than other facilities, and therefore account for different needs for parking?
I can have Cindy Jakes come up. I wanted to answer Dr. Shaw's question from before and answer in part one question that was in our planner's report to end the testimony for tonight. So I think she would be the best one to answer that.
Okay. Go ahead.
So I think my presentation is pretty much complete. Completed.
Yeah,
Maybe
so
not be
you want
complete.
Cindy to just answer the question, then go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh.
Cindy, would you come up, please?
So it is a typical staffing.
Just identify yourself for the.
Cindy
please.
Jakes.
She's been qualified as an expert before, testified several times.
So, Ms. Perez, the staffing is following the AL assisted living regulation.
That's assisted living. Assisted living, yeah.
Right, assisted living regulation. So there is no more staff than is what you see in a typical assisted living, except that If you're asking the ratio, it's about 1 to 8. And we do exceed the assisted living regulation, but in terms of the spaces, we're not going to exceed that 60 to 65 at the 2 p.m. peak shift change.
So it's 1 to 8 for assisted living, and what would this facility be?
It's 1 to 8, approximately 1 to 8.
Okay.
I mean, it's fluid in that when a person or when residents have more acute needs, we have to increase staff, but it's approximately 1 to 8 throughout our communities.
And again, I know you testified before, but how many communities do we have?
We have 4 healthcare-related communities and 5 other.
And your healthcare communities each have some dementia patients in the
Yes.
wings, is that right?
That's correct.
I have a question. These guidelines and standards that you've been referring to all night, everybody has, when was the last time they were updated?
I really couldn't say, but we are
Are you
surveyed
talking
every...
5 years, 10 years, 20 years? How updated are these standards that you are following? And I know it's not, you're just following what somebody wrote, but I was just curious to see, because my experience on being on these boards for many, many years is that parking is always an issue, whether it's a townhouse development or a neighborhood, and it's always under staff for parking. There's not enough all the time. And I can talk about each neighborhood that I'm familiar with, that has been done, and everybody said, well, it's the standard to put 1.5 spots per house, and never is enough, because they don't account for all the things that happen in today's world, and they look at what happened 20 or 30 years ago. And that's why I'm asking you about how old are these standards that we're following.
Well, I'll ask Cindy to respond to that, but in terms of standards, we have to comply with the New Jersey Department of Health standards for caring for people, and that deals with the ratios. And I know, generally speaking, those standards are reviewed periodically. I couldn't tell you when they were last changed. In terms of the statistical data, which was testified to on March 16th and is set forth in detail in A25, you can readdress, the timing of that and how recent that data is, if you could.
Are you talking about the certificate of need?
No, I'm talking about the amended shift pattern that you use to look at the shift changes and the like in terms of patterns.
I was more referring to the 1.7 number that Joe was referring to. Where did that come from, and how old has that number been in existence? Or whatever number that was.
All right, that's part of Hal's testimony in terms of standards. Would you
The
explain?
1.75 is from your ordinance.
Okay. So then we need to review our ordinances. Put that on the list.
I can answer that question,
on
is
the
that
list.
there's 3 different zones that permit this that were all adopted at different times, which the most recent one was recommended in the 2020 Master Plan Amendment.
So this 1.75 is from 2020?
That would be 0.75.
0.75 is from 2020?
Yes.
Okay.
And you've addressed all those different standards?
Yes.
Come up with your analysis?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't know why it's relevant.
Thank you, Kate. So should we go back, Mr. Chairman?
Are you finished?
I think Hal's finished in answering Vice Chair's
Right.
question, and she has a
Cindy's.
couple other points that we
Okay.
want to get to.
Go ahead.
Now, I believe, Dr. Shaw, it was at the last hearing that you had a question dealing with particular professionals that would be on duty. So Cindy's investigated that, and go ahead, Cindy.
Right, Dr. Shah. So I wanted to be certain, and you were concerned about the overnight in particular, so that in each neighborhood, there is a caregiver. So there's 4 neighborhoods, 4 caregivers, plus 2 floaters, plus a registered nurse, plus a security person with a complete panel of monitors. So that's 7 people on the overnight. So it's more than sufficient and fully meets the standard.
Thank you.
I hope that gives you a level of comfort for that.
Thank you. Yep.
Okay. And lastly, I'd like to go to Ms. Keller's letter. Ms. Keller, you had referred at one point about the request for what I perceive to be a little more clarification on the CON. Jim Higgins is certainly going to address that. I don't know if that was what you're referring to, but I thought, for abundance of caution, that we should have Cindy explain a little bit more leading up to Jim's testimony.
Yeah, I mean, my letter was indicating that testimony has been provided, and that, we would be looking for it in the specific form of the use variance testimony.
Oh, yes, okay.
You're welcome to put more on the record if the board would like, but I'm comfortable with what Ms. Jakes has testified to so far.
I did talk to Jim Higgins about that. I've talked to Cindy about that, and we thought that it would be prudent to maybe draw some lines between the dots. So with that in mind, Cindy, you're familiar with the process that started with the application for what was eventually issued as a certificate of need, which has been testified. You've been here every hearing, right? So you remember
Yes.
the testimony about the certificate of need, right?
Yes.
So as part of that application process, there were certain documents that were submitted that would have been reviewed by the Department of Health in the process of issuing the certificate of need. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So with that in mind, I will hurdle Loretta one last time to ask her to mark, these are two exhibits, but I suggested they be marked by you as one, and I do have copies for everybody. So while I'm handing that out, would you explain to the board, the two exhibits, so for each paper, click it's one set. So as part of the submittal, there were lots of exhibits submitted. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And what we're handing out are exhibits E and F, right?
Yes.
And they were the ones that were reviewed to issue the CON. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is.
So just explain, if you would, what E and F are that were.
So the certificate of need was granted based on the narratives and the exhibits E and F, which describe the village concept in the neighborhoods.
Okay, and to also draw the line between a couple docs, if I could call your attention back to A1, this goes back to the September 2021 hearing. Do you recall that the President, Larry Carlson, introduced what was a narrative?
Yes.
And attached that narrative as A1 was the May 3rd, 2021 certificate of need letter. Is that fair to say?
Right.
And that narrative, is that in essence the same narrative that was submitted to the Department of Health for their review and consideration of the purpose?
Yes, it was.
And it included, therefore, the concept of a village with the various number of houses and buildings.
That's right.
And there is some difference in the language in A1 in the narrative from the narrative that's attached as Exhibit E. But I can, since I prepared that, I can represent. The intent was to provide the information to you without necessarily giving irrelevant history to what happened, before we filed the application.
Okay, good, thank you.
That's all we have.
All right. Shortly, we'll go into public questions on tonight's testimony. First one, does any board member have any other remaining questions on tonight's testimony from either Mr. Simoff or Cindy J? Kate, Bob, you're all set for now?
Nothing
I
else.
think then it's appropriate to open the floor for questions. The members of the public, you have questions and questions only on tonight's testimony. Please come up to the microphone and identify yourself for the record.
Hello, Angela Curcio, 3 Williams Way. So my question was for Mr. Simoff. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
He's behind you. Go ahead.
So my first question was about the traffic memo. So I just wanted to confirm that the numbers, the numbers that you have, they were just referring to staff only.
No.
So that 68, it represents, it also accounts for visitors?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Okay, so then, I think in Cindy's testimony last time, she had mentioned that there could possibly be 15 weekday visitors, 30 weekend, and 50 on holidays. So then those 12 vacant spots don't account for those numbers then, is that correct?
So what I had, you're correct with the numbers, but they come various times during the day and through the weekend.
Okay. Okay, just want to make sure that they're not included in that. And then I also had a question. This was, I believe this was Mr. Brown. You had mentioned, quote, this was in regards to the sewer discussion. You had said, when you were addressing the board, you said, quote, "You do not have to worry about it. It's not your decision." I just wanted to highlight that when the board is doing the zoning, they are responsible, as highlighted in the planning memo, that it was for the inherently beneficial use of the public, and the sewer lines that would affect them, especially since it would be tearing up my property where I live on that corner. So can you just reconcile that for me? Sure.
When a board, like this board, issues a decision, it's very normal to make conditions subsequent. And I know you don't have a copy of the letter, but if you, I know the board members do. So if you looked at the April 5th letter, and if the board members want to look at it, at the end of the letter, and I'll show it to you, see?
Oh,
See-
yeah, I
see all
actually have
these?
that. I have
Oh,
that
yeah.
right here.
Oh, good. So look at, for example, among the 14 items, these are all standard conditions subsequent. So if the board does grant the approval, then the applicant has to get all collateral approvals that are necessary. And if they don't, then this project cannot proceed because the professional representatives will not allow it to go further. And just for example, if you look under 9, it says Bayshore has to sign off on this. And as indicated by Mr. Simoff, part of that process to get what's called a DEP extension permit involves getting an approval from Bayshore. So that's what I was referring to. This board doesn't have jurisdiction to make these collateral decisions. And in terms of your comment about your home, I have no idea about that, but I'm not aware why you, I don't know where you live exactly, but I don't know why any of that line.
The sanitary sewer line, that's where it's hooking up to. And I believe Mr. Simoff, he had said that he was going to go he was not going to go on the street, but over on the curb, if I have that correctly?
But we're not going on private property.
No, right, so there's, of course, I think there's like, what is it, the 20 feet that you usually have off of the property line, that is usually goes to the township?
Well,
Because I live on a corner.
Well, it's not on your property.
But what I'm saying is, behind the curb, the property line doesn't start.
Right, you have
20
that,
feet,
right.
20 feet back.
Okay.
That's the area that we intend to put the sewer line,
Okay, so on the border of my property then?
on the border.
Okay.
But we can't go on your property without your permission.
Right, so then, okay. So I just wanted though, then just to bring it up to make sure that the board is aware of it, and Mr. Chairman, I thank you that you have highlighted this, just to make sure that even though they do not have the jurisdiction to rule on it, it is in the intent, it is on your minds when reviewing it, okay?
Yeah. Just
Thank
to add one comment to Mr. Brown's comment. When this board, whether approves or doesn't approve or whatever, the board function ends. In the case of an approval, not just for this application, but for any application, there often are subsequent conditions put on it. After a formal vote, the attorney prepares a resolution which documents all the agreements or disagreements that have been reached. And these conditions carry forward. It's an administrative function that's served by the Department of Development upstairs. that after, and that the resolution is adopted, it's a legal document, and it states all of these things must be met. They must get all approvals or permits from anybody and everybody that has any authority on it. And typically, it's Bonnie, the administrative officer, who follows up on that. Only after all of those conditions are met does she issue a letter to the construction office saying conditions have been met, and only then can building permits and construction permits be issued. So that's all part of an ongoing construction overview process.
Right, right. And I appreciate the explanation. My main concern was that, you know, as the Holmdel zoning board, you're going to hear my concerns more than the Bay Shore Regional Sewer was going to. So, thank you.
Yeah, but all of the, you know, all of the other bodies have their say and their input. We don't control them, and we can just say, we want to make sure everything's in place before any construction happens.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Any other questions of tonight's testimony?
Good evening. Danielle Curcio, 3 Williams Way. I have a couple of different things. My first one to you, Mr. Brown, is what mechanism is going to be in place to ensure that UMC will comply with where you're saying the, or the commitments with the, you know, with the parking and all that stuff? Like after, if it's approved and you're gone, who's going to follow up and, you know, who's monitoring that you're doing what you said you were going to do?
Well, as Mr. Simoff testified, we offered 3 different types of parking. It's his opinion that there's no need for additional parking, but there are extra slots that have been testified to. And there was a suggestion, which the applicant has agreed to, that there will be an administrative process that'll be in the resolution. And so whatever reasonable condition that might be asked by the board will comply with, and so that'll be it.
Okay. Cindy, I'm sorry.
Let me just add one comment in that regard to go with the previous comments about the overall, after an approval, if it is approved, process. Not just is there a sign-off from Bonnie that sends a letter to the construction department saying conditions have been met, but subsequent during the construction period of any, we'll put quotes around commercial, this is not commercial, but any site plan, the township engineer will keep an eye on that construction project and verify in ongoing fashion that what's being built conforms with the approved plans.
Well, what happens after it's built and there just happens to not be enough parking there? Everyone has so many visitors. Do they get fined? Like, what happens to those cars? Do we just have cars all over? Like, what does happen?
That becomes their private issue at that point. If it's approved, unless they want to come back for more.
But it's their private issue, but I'm now their new neighbor, so it's really like mine and my neighbor's problems.
So they'll have to address it, quite honestly. If it's an impact in their facility, they're going to have to address it.
Right.
But we don't control it at that point.
Right, because there's no would be no parking on the street there, so would they be crossing over from Dwight or walking up Van Choik from Country Woods? Like, it could, you know, I'm just really concerned because that goes to another thing. I don't think we really have a complete, with the staff and all this, like how Angela had mentioned that something wasn't included. I think we need a complete about the parking and the traffic. It seems that we forget staff in it, or something's always been omitted, and we bring it up, but we need to...
Let's limit yourself to questions at this point in time, please. You have a specific question.
Well, that is my question. I mean, that it's not complete. Okay, well, then I'll go on to the next one. Again, I'm sorry I'm addressing you by your first name. I can't remember.
No, that's fine. If you're okay.
Okay, I'm fine. I'm Danielle, that's fine.
Call Cindy.
So do you accept patients on a varied levels? You mentioned that the acute ones would need, obviously, more attention, because you said it was a 1 to 8 patient. So if we had, I mean, no one could say, you know, if someone's getting, you know, going in the wrong direction, getting more acute. So what happens if we have, so then we're going to have more staff that's going to have to, you know, apparently come on. So then, because we don't want to be understaffed, right? So now we have more parking, like more people who need to be parked. So how do you accept the patients?
Speaking from experience, you're really just talking about a handful of people. It's not that you're going to have 105 that all need extra care at one time. It just doesn't happen that way. It's much more fluid than that.
I'm just thinking like if someone falls, patient 1 falls, patient 3 has an accident,
Right.
patient food,
And that's typical.
Someone, someone needs to get to them, so.
That's very typical, what you just described, and the ratio and the amount of staff that we have is adequate.
Okay, and then I guess this is for Mr. Al, okay. So the sewer, the hookup, so that would be over a half a mile away. So if you don't tear up Van Schoik, you've got to tear up then behind. I know it's not our property, but we do maintain it. So I guess we would get notified on the corner of the corner of Williams Way and Van Schoik where you would be hooking up. That's a very dangerous corner. There's been loss of life there. So I don't know what entails, if we can keep into consideration, do you know what entails and how long such a project would go on? Because there's about 8 homes. There are buses for our school children that go up there. It's a detriment for us.
Well, first of all, a standard practice for when you do construction is prepare a traffic control plan.
Okay.
And depending upon, and that's reviewed by the county, and most of the time they don't let you build during peak hours. So from 7 to 9 or so in the morning, depending upon which direction the traffic flows, etc., the county reviews it and they say, okay, you can't start until 9:30 in the morning, and you have to pack up by 3 in the afternoon. That's typical of what happens. And then, so there's what's called a traffic control plan. You might need flaggers, you might need lane closings. Like as an example,
Most traffic studies, when they put to see how many cars go by, has that,
flagger.
no, I know, but has that been done on that road to
Yeah,
see?
the state did it.
And what year was that?
19,
Is it 20,
2000.
is it 2020 during COVID or,
No, it was
2018?
before-
Okay.
it was before COVID.
Because I mean, I could say for all those Winchester, Fox Hunt, Galloping, myself, you can't get out of there. I mean, I'm gonna have to do my own investigating or try to see about a traffic study because I don't agree with what you're saying, and there has been loss of life on that thing. You said there's only 5
excuse me, is
accidents.
that a question?
So, yes, I'm questioning his study, and
Well, the first question I'm trying to answer
yeah.
is the county will require us to provide a traffic control plan.
Right.
And if you shut down lanes or you detour traffic or whatever, that has to be approved as part of the construction plan. So I think that would answer your question. And we have to also maintain access to all the driveways. We can't shut anybody's driveway off while we're doing the construction.
Right. So we just don't know how long it takes for a sewer hookup to take place. That was the question. Like how long we would be inconvenienced.
Most of the time, the county requires that we notify the property owners when we start construction. I know we have to notify the county and the town 72 hours before we start, and then we will have had a traffic control plan approved by the county, and I guess in the township as to how we're going to build it and provide safe traffic flow.
If I could add, Ms. Cursor, just so it's clear for everyone, this board doesn't control off-site traffic. Like, that's a township function, that's case law, so we can control, we should be concerned about on-site parking, ingress, egress, safety issues, right?
Well, I wasn't.
So what's on the roads?
Right.
Unfortunately, this board can't say.
I wasn't asking that for
I'm just
my.
letting you know.
Yeah, I was really. I have to. As I said, I'm going to have to do my own research about the traffic study because the one that he said isn't really jiving from just what we're experiencing. Just even the loss of life that's been on that road and on that corner where they're going to be doing this hookup. So I was wondering how long it was going to take for such a thing to happen. So okay,
Again,
I think
that's not the jurisdiction of this
Yeah.
board.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I do want to address one of the comments about the perception that the consideration of traffic is not being considered. So I'll call your attention to testimony by Ms. Jakes on March 16th. I'm sure you don't want me to go to the transcript. Nobody has the transcripts, but I do have a summary here of her testimony. Well, just tell us what the summary was to get to the heart of it. There was testimony about visitors in addition to your testimony about A25, which is staff. Is that fair to say? What did you say about that?
Right, so that the average number of visitors, based on our experience, is approximately 15 per day at various times, but primarily in the evening. Weekends, it goes up to approximately 30, primarily mid-afternoon, and for approximately 60 to 120 minutes.
And so Hal, did you take that in consideration?
Yes. Plus the standards. The ITE has a standard, the township has a standard, the state RSIS has a standard, and we exceed all those standards.
Okay,
And
good.
One more additional comment. The board has a traffic review by their consultant, and they confirm my analysis.
Great. Okay, any other members of the public have any questions of testimonies tonight? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Regina Stephanie. I live at 8 Fox Hunt Road. Okay, my question is, okay, so it's my understanding that there's a limit to the amount of land that can be developed, meaning impervious surfaces. If the grass parking spaces need to be converted to grasscrete, does that increase the percentage of impervious surfaces?
No, because the limit is pervious. So, and we're asking for a slight variance to that. But the grasscrete is impervious pavement, so the water runs through it. So it's not considered impervious. It's pervious.
So it's not part of coverage?
It's not part of coverage.
Okay. But, I mean...
Any other questions of tonight's testimony?
Just to address that, right? If this does become a problem, then later on, that would have to be paved, correct? I mean, so then it would change.
No.
No?
No. If it's Grass Creek, it won't change.
But we're saying if like there's a constant overflow.
No. Grass Creek can take cars.
So the whole thing would always remain Grass Creek, so that other...
Because the loop road that we proposed for the
Right.
emergency vehicles is
Right.
made out of grasscrete.
Yeah, what grasscrete is a concrete matrix with holes in it so that water can go through the holes and be absorbed into the ground.
I want to go back
It's
to the
considered
sewers for a
pervious.
second. The sewer that you would be hooking up to ends at Williams Way, I think you said? And what size is that sewer at that point, do you know?
It's a trunk line, I'm not sure.
You don't know the diameter?
No, but our flow on scale of things, is the equivalent of about 10 or 15 homes. It's not a high flow. And again, we're going to have to submit to the powers that be that everything works.
And you're pumping uphill to Williams Way, and then Williams Way is downhill from there?
Yes.
Okay, so...
Well, it's up and downhill from there.
Well, we're downhill and then back uphill.
All right. I really want to keep addressing the sewer thing because I'm really concerned about the neighbors, and, we're putting this in, and I just don't want to undersize it. And if the future, that, the town or those neighbors want to hook up, I want to make sure that pipe is big enough. And I know that it's not our jurisdiction, I understand that, and I'm sure Bob's going to talk to the right people, even if I have to call up somebody on Bay Shore Sewer Authority myself and ask them about it. Because the way you put it, he said, as long as they approve it. Well, obviously, if you go and say, hey, we only need a 2-inch line, we're serving 15 houses, they're not going to say, what about the rest of the neighborhood? They're going to say, okay, go ahead, do that. So I'm looking for somebody to say, hey, they're running this sewer line, and they're digging up the road, they're digging up people's homes, properties and frontage to put this line in, and we never thought about anybody else getting a sewer line for them? Just doesn't make any sense.
I think it's I think, but I'm not certain that it's the township engineer, because I know he's been responsible for the, taking care of the subsidiary lines in our own neighborhood.
And I just say, there are multiple ways of handling the sewer issue, multiple ways of designing it. And we're going to develop, we're proposing one way. If it's not acceptable to Bob or to whomever, we're going to have to change it.
Fine.
But if you told me, for example, the line I'm putting in is good for 500 houses, I would say, okay, we're done. But when you tell me it's a 2-inch line, it's good for 15 houses, that doesn't make sense to
And
me.
not just that, but you said that this is the equivalent of approximately 10 houses. I would absolutely disagree. You've got 105 residents plus
No,
roughly
I'm just talking off the cuff. It's a
60
very...
staff people, right?
No,
You've
it's
got roughly
I apologize.
160
It's a very,
people?
it's a low rate. It's not a high, we're not talking about a high-rise residential
I get it, but it's
development.
more the equivalent of 50 houses than 10 houses.
Well, whatever the DEP
Maybe
and
more.
the state mandate, I spoke too soon.
Okay.
The DEP and the state mandate what the sewer flow is per bed. And and those numbers are very conservative. And
Just so you know,
we-
we're listening very carefully, Mr. Simhoff, to
Yeah,
what you said.
but what I'm concerned, and I don't want to keep repeating the same thing, is this is only designed for your facility, and that's the only thing you're considering. And there was
That's all.
one resident that talked about inheritable beneficial use. This is only for your use, not for anybody else's use. Like
Well,
you,
again,
so,
That's what they're responsible for.
That's an issue that has to be addressed with the township.
Yes.
all right, Bob, got homework.
Yes, I did.
Very good. Any last questions for tonight's testimony? Seeing none, we'll close tonight's portion of the public discussion of this testimony. And there is further testimony to be given on this application. In particular, we have yet to hear from the planner. And earlier this evening, we did cancel our next meeting for April 20th. So the next,
Mr. Chairperson, can we get an idea of a better layout of how much longer this application is going to go on for?
I can't tell you how many people are going to ask how many questions, or what the objectors are going to put on in the way of testimony.
How much more time does the applicant need? Because we're not really making efficient use of these meetings, so how much more time does the applicant need to put on their case?
I can't comment on the efficiency. We're doing the best we can, and we've been doing that for many months. However, we have one witness for direct, and the process is that we have two attorneys, if you've seen before. They said last time that they may present some other witnesses. I don't know who they are.
Just your case. You have
one witness. That's correct.
And how long do you think that witness needs?
Well, he certainly no longer than a meeting. We've basically been having two witnesses each meeting. So we would hope it would be half a meeting. But again, he is arguably the key summary witness. So just for questions by my friendly attorneys over here, I suspect they will have questions alone. And we will do our best to provide
The key
as
is
much
that it's the planner that addresses the issue of the use variance.
Yes, that's
So that's
correct.
a key set of testimony.
That's correct.
So-
I want to make one,
We have asked them to be ready.
I just want to make one hybrid comment, because Mr. Higgins can't be here tonight. I didn't want to have Hal go into anything related to planning that Mr. Higgins might rely upon. So based on what we heard tonight and the fact that there's going to be a meeting between the engineers, it is possible that Hal might have to come back to satisfy whatever the Collier firm says. And then I will probably have Hal provide just a little preliminary information that Jim Higgins might rely upon for his expert testimony.
Also, I anticipate that based on tonight's discussion and what Hal's indicated, he and Bob have been talking, that there'll be some further revised plans. But in any case, as indicated earlier, we don't have a meeting on April 20th. The next subsequent meeting is May 4th. There will probably be a backyard variance on the agenda that evening as well. So what I think we're going to do is continue this hearing till May 4th in hopes that on May 4th, the applicant can complete their presentation. My gut is that the objectors and their witnesses will not be able to complete that night, but if at least one or two of them are prepared to continue, we'll try to move ahead as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So it is possible we won't be able to complete all witnesses, all testimony in public on May 4th, but it may take one further meeting beyond that.
So
And
the
we-
plan is the second meeting that the public would get their opportunity to speak and we would have a
Once
vote on
everything
that.
else is completed, yes.
Well, I think it's important so the public knows when they're going to get to be heard as well.
Well,
and-
we can't control anyone and everyone. The applicant has their right to present their case as they wish. And
Not
that's
without
what,
limit.
And I would like to make one clarification that might be comforting. So, again, I welcomed the new board members in February when we first met. It was a calculation and a decision that we thought it was prudent, if not very helpful, to give some history, especially for the new board members. Now, if that's not what everybody feels was efficient, then I apologize, but that was a point. So, for example, Cindy did talk about what was testified in 2021 on purpose, and because there was some continuity in that. But Mr. Higgins will not do that because he's a brand-new witness, and he is summarizing
Okay.
how the testimony interrelates to his
so
analysis.
our goal then on May 4th is to try to complete the direct testimony from the applicant.
Yes, sir.
Whether we can get through all the objectors' questions, I mean, I don't know if either objector or attorney wishes to comment that they can hypothesize how much time they will need to present their cases.
Mr. Chair, we're planning to call 2 witnesses, so, I can't imagine them taking more than a meeting, depending on the kinds of questions they receive.
As soon as,
I would say I can't imagine it taking more than one, but that
it's not going
depends.
to happen in 10 minutes either.
No, it never does, as much as you think it might, right?
Okay.
Will you be ready on May 4th, just in case they finish earlier?
We were ready tonight. Okay. Yeah, so we'll be ready May 4th.
And I will say that when I found out that Mr. Higgins couldn't come and I saw these gentlemen, I did call him aside and I forewarned him that we were going to have the main witness here. So.
Thank you.
Yes, Brian Clancy for Middletown. We don't expect to be calling any witnesses.
Okay, but you presumably will wish to make some kind of statement or comment
Correct.
or however you, and it'll take more than 1 minute.
More than 1 minute, probably. Safe assumption, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I mean, scheduling this kind and planning in advance, questions always come up. And it's appropriate to let everyone get a chance to get their input in and say, so sometimes this takes a little longer than, so anyway, with all that, we're going to close the hearing on this application for tonight. We'll continue without any further notice to the public till the evening of May 4th. That will begin that evening with a hearing on a different application, a backyard variance, and then we'll continue with the hearing on the dementia center. To reiterate again, end of this hearing for tonight will continue on May the 4th. Thank you all.
Thank you.
At 7 starting
members
at
of the board.
7 p.m.
Appreciate it.
In that case, is there any further business from anyone for tonight from the board? Any, Bob, Kate, anybody? In that case, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion, second?
I'll second it.
All in favor? We're opposed? No one, you never get a no on that one. Okay, we are adjourned.
That was a waste of time. The maintenance is still on.
The recording is still on.
All right. Turn off the recording.
She will. Give her a chance.
It was a